I got to sit in on one on the HIV criminalization laws. That was really, really awesome. I know they all are, so, and you can't sit in on all of them, right? Well, my name is Kathy Ferguson, as you know. I happen to be a professor of sociology at Macomb Community College here in Warren and Mount Clemens. I was born in Detroit, and then I grew up in the suburb of what is now Sterling Heights, back when it was still farmers' fields. So, yeah, I'm that old. Yeah. I'm sure that some of you might be wondering, why am I standing up here? What is she going to talk about? You know, who is she? And I had to think about that myself when they first asked me to come and speak tonight, and I came up with a few possible answers. But first I thought maybe it was because that I've been an AIDS activist since 1988. Or perhaps it was because during Clinton administration, the first Clinton administration, not the ones. I served on the President's HIV/AIDS Advisory Council during his presidency. Or perhaps I'm here because I've served on the board, I had served on the board of the National Association of People with AIDS and the National Hemophilia Foundation during the turbulent years of the mid-'80s and '90s. It was a scary time. Perhaps it was because I co-authored a book about hemophilia and AIDS with my daughter when she was only 8 years old. It could be, perhaps, my involvement with prevention education, HIV prevention education, on local, regional, and national levels has made a difference in people's lives. Maybe that's why I was supposed to be here. I thought it might have something to do with starting the first women's support group to deal with HIV infection here in the Detroit area. Back in the day when, like I said, there was nothing for women. And we started a group, so I thought, well, maybe that was it. Or perhaps more realistically, it was because I'm a mother. I'm a widow of a man who died of AIDS complications. Or because I was unwittingly infected with HIV during my marriage to him. Neither he nor I, nor most people at that time, knew anything, that was 1983, about HIV transmission. But ultimately, that was my work with girls and women through the Stitches Doll Project. Over there, you will see some dolls on display. These dolls are very special dolls with real life stories to tell. They were all made by women and girls, young and old, of all faiths and races, from many parts of the world actually, who were living, although some perhaps have since died after making them, living with HIV infection. Not only do women create the doll that you see, but they answer a very important question, which is, if your doll could talk, what would she say? What would she want people to know? Some of them have lengthy responses, others nothing at all. But those monographs are displayed with the dolls. This project was co-founded in 1999 by myself and a friend and co-worker of mine, Candace Munch, and we were working at MAP, the Midwest AIDS Prevention Project, back in the day. She has since gone on to get her PhD and teaches language arts in North Dakota now at Dickinson University. Good for her. Many of you know her. We wanted to think of an interesting way to allow women to tell their stories in order to help them themselves deal with their HIV diagnosis, but also to educate the greater community about the reality of HIV/AIDS, especially as it pertained to women. Because from the beginning of the HIV epidemic, when the emphasis, of course, was the incidence too, was amongst gay men and perhaps, IV drug users and stuff like that. It wasn't until 1993 that they changed, the CDC changed, right, the diagnosis lists to actually add in invasive cervical cancer, which is the #1 killer of women with HIV, okay? So this is at a time we were trying to think of something, some way to bring in women to kind of be able to save their stories and then to use them to educate other people. Because there weren't any targeted messages directly to women during that time period, The only thing that you mostly heard was, they would tell people is, to women, don't have sex until you get married, and then you're safe. But clearly I knew that message was false because of my own experience. What I did not know at that time, though, is how different and dangerous it is to be born female in this world. Since that time, I went back to school, got my bachelor's in psychology, got my master's in sociology, that's why I can teach now. And I learned a lot about what's going on in other parts of the world, and it propelled me to further expand my work with girls and women. So I do a lot of stuff now. My focus is about gender inequality. And worldwide, if you look at the whole population, right, worldwide, the burden of HIV disease falls largely on women, okay? We have, I think, well, let's see, 2014, the number was 36.9 million people worldwide were living with HIV infection. Because women are viewed as lesser beings in most countries, they don't have the freedom to require or even discuss condom use during sexual intercourse, okay? They're treated as possessions rather than people. They are raped, often by their own male family members. They have their genitals, including their clitoris, cut off and sewn shut without sanitary equipment, FGM, female genital mutilation. They're traded off to older men to be married with no regard for their personal safety or their life opportunities or education. They most often have no legal rights or power to change their circumstances. They are truly victims and they get infected with HIV because of that. They have no power. Most women are raised to be caregivers, and if they have children that they have to care for, they don't, and this is true here too, they don't seek medical care for themselves, okay? Even when it might be available. And if it is available in many places, they have to travel very far to get to this medical care. And again, if they have children, they have to take children with them, okay? And there's usually no child care options available. So all of these things, right, impact women. So women that are infected, that have no access or ability to get their HIV medications, means that more babies are born with the virus as well. Again, in 2014, there was 2.6 million children living with HIV infection in the world. We shouldn't have that. It shouldn't be happening. And in 2015, they said the upside of that, though, was 77% of pregnant women were now actually receiving HIV medications, women that had not previously had access to that. So there's a piece of good news there. The doll project has been very successful and grown, even though we're self-funded through local fundraisers and staffed by volunteers. It exists on its own merit through donations of supplies and tireless support from people who feel that it's vitally important what we're doing. I encourage all of you who have not gotten a chance to meet the girls, as we call them, to do so tonight, and we'll also have them up tomorrow. You will be amazed by them, you will be inspired by them, and you will be touched. You may even recognize some of them. They could be your mom or your sister, your aunt, your friend, your next door neighbor. Yes, these dolls represent all women who live with HIV. They honor their struggles. Many of these women who've made these dolls, and thousands of others, must live in secrecy. Many of them do, because they're afraid of how people will treat them, whether they will lose friendships or their jobs or where they're living if somebody finds out, or their kids can be taken away from them. There's still all kinds of really bad things that are happening. These are women from all walks of life and from different countries and cultures. Come and meet them and experience them. I promise you'll walk away having learned something new. We also have a website that stitchesdollproject.org, but I'll talk more about the dolls in a minute. I want to spend a few moments to go back in time a little bit. Some faces, actually many faces in here I see in this room, I've known for many years, and I know that you too have lived through the nightmare of HIV in this country in the early days. But I also see lots of younger people here, and I wanted to share a little bit of my story to paint a picture of the early days for you. For many of you who weren't alive then, you don't know how far that we've actually come. You kind of only know where we are today in the fight against HIV. Therefore, I'd like to bear witness. I grew up in a family with 6 kids. I almost died when I was 2 because of a fatal nut allergy, and I also suffered from severe asthma as a child. I was in the hospital a lot, more often than not. And this made me very aware of my mortality at a young age. So I therefore lived my life cautiously, not engaging in many things that other kids did. There was no drinking, drugs, or sexual intercourse for me as a teenager. I wanted to take care of myself and my body. I didn't meet my husband, Michael, until I was 23 years old. And within 2 years we were married and we had our beautiful daughter, Stephanie. This was in 1984. So for those of you doing the math, you will realize, remember that in 1984 was the year that HIV antibody test became available. It was developed and then used to test the blood supply and plasma products. Because my husband was born with a bleeding disorder, hemophilia, he had been exposed to the blood supply his whole life through transfusion and then in more recent years through the clotting factor concentrates that are also made from pooled human blood. Up to 20,000 donors sometimes to make a batch of this stuff. Those blood products were infected, obviously, because the blood supply was infected. And those were the things that hemophiliacs used to inject into their body when they would have a bleeding episode. So you can see how over 90%, over 95%, I think, of all the severe hemophiliacs got infected with HIV because of that. My daughter was born in April of '84. By June of that year, I was deathly ill, sicker than I'd ever been in my life. I had been enjoying finally being a mom, breastfeeding my daughter and bonding with her. But now I had to wean her because I had to take some very nasty medications to get better. It took me a long time. It took me a couple of months before I actually felt like myself again. But if I had known then, I would have understood that I would never be my old self again. Because early the following year, we were contacted by the Hemophilia Treatment Center in Detroit and asked to take part in a national study regarding the safety of the blood supply. They took blood from all 3 of us, and Stephanie was not even a year old at that point. We had to answer some very personal questions about our sex lives and where we'd been traveling recently, and I wondered what any of that had to do with the safety of a blood transfusion. At the time, it made no sense to me. Of course, now I know. Then we were told that we would be, every 6 months there'd be a follow-up visit. Someone would call us. So I had never been part of a medical study before, but my husband, Michael, had been. Apparently, when you're born with hemophilia and you need constant medical care, it makes you an easy group to do research on. He assured me that this was just another study in the whole list of studies. Well, more than 6 months elapsed, and we hadn't heard from anybody, so I called down to Children's Hospital, and I spoke with the study nurse there. And she brusquely kind of told me on the phone to bring my daughter and Mike and come down to the hospital the next day. Just like that. Okay. Well, what we were told that day and how it was handled changed my entire world. It was December of '85. I was 27 years old, a new mom. My husband and I were infected with HIV. And they told us that the good news was that Steph did not show signs of the infection at that point. They were not sure how long it might take. However, they said that she would need to be retested once a year for the next 5 years. Of course, now we know that you see it much sooner than that, but they didn't know that then. So for Mike and I, the future was bleak. And I remember vividly, though, a few sentences that stuck with me then. So this was then. 1, most people died within 18 months to 2 years of infection. 2, get your affairs in order. They told us, find someone to raise your daughter. 3, but don't tell anybody about your infection. 4, people are losing their jobs and being kicked out of where they live. Another reason to not tell anybody. 5, that my husband and I should live as brother and sister. In other words, having no sex because of the risk of re-exposure to the virus. I was 27 years old. I had been married not even 2 years at that point. For the rest, I remember it's like just, I was staring into a big black hole of despair, and there was no hope for us then. There weren't any medical therapies, there was not really any good information to be had. What little was known about the virus regarding transmission was minimal. There were plenty, though, of conspiracy theories, fear, hate, stigma, and discrimination. And for those of you who weren't around at that point, this situation was very, very grim. People who had AIDS in the Detroit area were sent to Hutzel Hospital, the violet floor. That was the only place that would admit you. Funeral homes refused to accept bodies of people who died of AIDS, and cemeteries denied burial to people with AIDS. So being infected with HIV truly was the modern day plague. And so we told no one. And for 5 years we kept that terrible secret. We rarely spoke about it at all. My husband felt so guilty that I had been infected through him. He knew I didn't blame him, but he still felt really guilty. And we knew nothing that could have prevented that. We didn't have the information, so we couldn't have done anything. So to the outside world, we went on like nothing was wrong, until Ryan White died, April of 1990. And that's when we went public on the news with Bill Bonds. And those of you who remember Bill Bonds, he was not an easy person to interview by. And that's how my entire family found out about our infection. I was blessed, however, to have a family that did not turn their backs on us like many other people's families. And that's saying something back in those days, 1990, because what I know to be true, and we've heard about it today actually quite a bit already here at the conference, is stigma and discrimination are still alive and well in 2016. And stigma keeps people from getting tested and seeking effective treatment. The HIV criminalization laws that were written in 1988, as I was saying, keep lots of people in the closet. Those laws were written when little was known about transmission, and then treatment was just a faraway dream. We have effective treatment now, and those laws that make criminals out of HIV-positive people need to be changed. Those laws cause fear and discrimination from others, and they give a false sense of security to people that aren't infected, who think that the laws are going to somehow protect them, because they don't. And worse, they create self-hate and self-destructive behaviors for the people who are infected. Okay, it does make you feel like you are a criminal just for existing. We all know that changing laws alone won't change everybody's hearts and minds, but it's a good step in the right direction. So we all can be part of that fight, and there's things we can do, right? You can sign petitions, you can write letters to Congress people, you can go and lobby, I mean, you can educate others. Okay, we need to be doing more of that. I'm certainly going to be doing more of that. And I must say, I was born into white privilege, and as a woman, a white middle-class woman, I had never experienced discrimination that I knew of, that I was aware of, prior to my HIV diagnosis. But HIV certainly changed my life in many ways, even before I started getting sick and my husband dying. The stigma didn't only affect Mike, my husband Mike and I, it had a devastating effect on our daughter. She suffered so much as a young child, not understanding why her parents were so secretive, taking medicine, crying late at night when nobody else was around. She learned at a very young age not to talk about such things, but she knew that we had something really wrong with us. She had nowhere to turn and no one safe that she could talk to. In first grade, her teacher told me that Stephanie would start looking out the window toward the end of the school day looking for my car. And she would start to cry because she was afraid that I had died and I wouldn't be there to pick her up. No kid should have to feel that way, right? My daughter was not infected herself, but I think she suffered more than we did in many ways. She was little and scared, and she didn't have the words to express her feelings. HIV had definitely taken its toll on her. And when her dad died, she was only 8. And she told me that she wished she was infected too because she didn't want to be left here alone. And I think I died a little bit inside that day. My husband, Mike, had had lymphoma. And as many of you know, that can kill people who have healthy immune systems. He didn't last long, 8 months start to finish. He was only 33 years old. And I've had many surgeries for invasive cervical cancer, shingles, candidiasis, neuropathy in my feet, pancreatitis, rosacea, ulcerative colitis caused by the experimental HIV drugs I've been on. subsequent rectal surgery. That was fun. And the most obvious side effect, of course, to others is the wasting syndrome or the lipodystrophy. My face is the face of AIDS. This list doesn't include all the other serious side effects from the cavalcade of HIV meds that I've been taking since 1992. Every day, following following doctor's orders. And yet, it was by the people in the medical community that I and many others have been treated so poorly. From the one GI doc that told me that it was a waste of his time and scarce resources to do a colonoscopy on me because you people are gonna die anyway. To a medical staff person who used 2 pencils to grab a bag that had a urine sample in a cup inside of it, because that was from a dear friend of mine, so that they wouldn't get AIDS from it. Okay, again, people who don't understand and are ignorant of the facts. So right now, I'm on a great regimen that keeps me undetectable, and this means that I'm less likely to infect my husband or anybody else. My immune system can continue to do what it's supposed to do and keep me healthy. I hope that lasts a good while. But even though I have access to HIV meds, sometimes I get tired of taking them. When I speak to myself here, I'm speaking as an AIDS educator, know how important adherence is. Because we talk about it all the time. We tell people don't miss a dose, you might develop resistance to it. But the reality of taking meds every single day of your life is truly exhausting. I'm not proud to say that I've missed doses, but I'm trying to be authentic here. So yes, I'm very thankful every day that I have access to these life-saving medications. I wouldn't be otherwise. But that doesn't mean that's easy. And let's not forget the long-term side effects or effects of these medications, right? That we're only starting to see now because people have been on the meds for a long time. Like the damage to the heart muscle and your kidneys and the burden on the liver, right? It's definitely easier today than it was years ago when we had to take literally handfuls of medication, right? Some, toxic meds. Remember DDI? One of my friends said, what? Diarrhea, indigestion? Or don't do it? DDI? Yeah. Some of me had to take on an empty stomach, some on a full stomach. HIV research and medications have come, obviously, a very long way in the last 30-some years. Medications are better formulated, they have less side effects. And now we have PrEP, right? PrEP and PAP too, pre-exposure prophylaxis. And they can be taken, obviously, to either keep somebody from getting infected or right after that and hopefully keep them from, seroconverting. So we've come a long way. At least in the United States, HIV is now considered a chronic illness, no longer terminal. But unfortunately, there are still many places in the world where people don't have access to even clean water and food, let alone expensive HIV medications. But we can still hope, right? So hope has carried me through many, many dark, lonely, and painful nights. And through the years before effective therapy, and everyone around me was dying of AIDS, one by one, victims of this diabolical retrovirus. I thought that it would never end, and I thought I would be next. But again, I've been blessed with loving people in my life, many of which actually are in this room right now. And they gave me love and understanding without judgment. And along with my family and closest friends, my daughter Stephanie has always been a beacon of light to me. She was the reason that I could go on during those worst days of my life. And I've learned so much from her. She's an angel to me. She's 32 now. Awesome, right? She's 32. And the other person who has made my last 18 years of my life the happiest is my current one and only awesome husband, Bill Darbison. Thank you for everything, Bill. We love you, Bill. Everybody loves Bill. I really do love you more every day. So I stand here today as one small piece of a whole story. Each of us can, in our own ways, make a difference in this crazy world. We have a voice. You need to use it. Let's vote, right? We need to do all of those things. That's why you're at this conference, so you can share what you know with other people, look for collaborations where there aren't maybe currently any, continue to build networks. We can tackle any challenge if we work together, and Michigan does an awesome job. We've always done an awesome job. When we talk to other people in other states, they're always like, Michigan, where it's at. I'm like, yes. It's because we're here, okay? It's all about us. We're awesome. So if I could just then take one last moment to honor and remember my wonderful late husband, Michael Walter Jarris, and speak his name. And if all of you want to hold those people that you have lost in your hearts and your minds for a moment, perhaps speak their names out loud or silently if you wish.
Maurice Alexander.
And then lastly, finally, I just want to thank everybody here and all of those who are alive and still out there every day working in the trenches. You are important. You make a difference in people's lives. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you.
We love her, Bill.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Next up, we have some awards that we would like to hand out. And so the first one up is Outstanding Achievement in HIV Care. Andre Truss. He is presenting the award. You can still clap for Andre.
Good evening. I'm going to take a minute